Hi everyone, welcome to our next short attention span webinar. Kelly Malazzi, how are you?
I'm doing great, Bill. How are you?
I am doing well, thank you. I'm doing well. This is a fun one. This is called Understanding the 20-to-1 Ratio. And if you don't understand what we're even talking about, then we will let you know. 20-to-1 ratio is something that I first found out about, when I was in a training class in the early 80s. And what it was about, this was when I was working for UARCO Business Forums, this was drilled into our head. And the trainer was talking to us about the difference between the purchase price of any given printed piece and the usage cost of that piece, the purchase price versus the usage cost. And what they said was that for every dollar your client spends on any given printed piece, they spend another $20 using that printed piece. So we were taught, again, our selling motto, solve the problem, earn the order. So they used to show us this, and they'd say, look, you know, the piece costs $1, but everything that happens to that printed piece, from the time it comes in to receiving, to the time it either gets shredded or shipped, thrown out, obsolete, or whatever, everything that happens to that printed piece goes into the other side, and on average, that's $20. So the thinking was, if you can help the client to save money on either side of the equation, where would you want them to save money? Because the $1 area is the cost of the piece. The $20 area is the cost of using that piece. Now, Kelly, if you were my client and I said, listen, Kelly, I can save you 10% on either side, where would you want me to focus?
I think I'd want you to focus on the $20 side.
Okay, but how do I do this? You've been coaching. In fact, when you were my client, you heard me say this, and this is one of the things we first talked about. How do you know what goes into that $20 area as a sales rep, Kelly?
Well, again, it really speaks to focusing again on being a consultant as opposed to an order taker. So what you want to understand about this piece is how it's being used and what the kind of logistics about it are too. So we do want to address things like waste and obsolescence. A really good example of this was one of our biggest customers was the Society for it was clinical pathology, the American Society of Clinical Pathology, and they had a gigantic room full of printed material that ultimately got thrown into 2 dumpsters full of garbage. And so when we really started looking at all the stuff that they had printed, how it was being used logistically, how it was being shipped and everything like that, we really started focusing on on-demand printing and digital printing and kind of just-in-time fulfillment and things like that. We ended up saving them a colossal amount of money, but the usage or the per piece cost went way up. I mean, we started charging them a lot more than what they were paying, but it was completely revolutionizing the way that they communicated with their customers. And so it really just allowed us to, again, address that problem of all this waste, all this obsolescence, some information changing all the time. And so we really focused on that $20 area and we probably increased volume for us by over 50%.
Yeah, and here's the thing, you know, what a great way to differentiate yourself. If you had walked in the door and you had said, you know what, I can lower the price of your printing. Let me give you a price. Give me a quote. Give me an opportunity. Give me something that I can quote on. You would have just basically been saying to the client, I'm just like every other printer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lowball the first job, and then I'll make it up in the long run. But you're not. See, Kelly, the master sales rep, focuses on the $20 area and says, let me learn the story behind this printed piece. Tell me what has happened so that I can understand and I can come up with perhaps a better print solution. Now, my own example is this. This is a client that we had. You know, this is a digital application that we had, but a client had said, you know what, we get the best prices. We are dealing with absolutely fantastic prices. You can't touch us. And this was my client. They called me. And we did I happened to be out in Chicago in about 2 weeks, and I went in and I flew in and I was talking directly to the buyer. He said the same thing, best price anywhere. So we went down to the shipping area. We started talking about the documents. And the shipping people started telling us that what was happening was the sales reps around the country would call and they'd say, oh my gosh, I've got a trade show coming up tomorrow. I need to get a box of the data sheets FedExed into me. And I said, really, how often does this happen? He said, I don't know, 4 or 5 times a month. And I mean, can you imagine the cost of sending in 2 big boxes? FedEx, And yet, and there you go. There's a perfect example of stuff that goes into, cost that goes into the $20 area. So what we did was we came up with a different idea. We came up and said, look, this is all this is a printed piece off of a file. Let's take the digital file and let's go out to different parts of the country and let's find indigos in this case, and let's print small quantities on demand, ship them locally for free. We'll eliminate your shipping costs. And we showed the guy in 2 or 5 figures how much money he was going to save in shipping alone. Now the interesting part was that the cost of the document went up. So the $1 area increased, but because we were saving so much in the $20 area, the client bought in. And I will tell you, Kelly, excuse me, I will tell you, the selling cycle on that, after that process, was about 5 months. Even though we had a phenomenal solution, the guy still couldn't pull the trigger. Once he did, never went back. All right, so Kelly, then how do you go back? I talked about finding the story behind the printed piece. How do you find out? What does that mean to find out what's in that $20 area?
Well, here it's very important that you focus on who you're talking to, first of all, because you really want to understand kind of what the strategic purpose of the piece is. If it's a marketing piece, you know, what is the offer like, and what do they hope to achieve by it, and how will they track what their goals were and whether they achieved their goals. So you want to find out how many get thrown away, how is it being used, what's the goal. So you really, again, are focusing on those kind of strategic marketing questions rather than what's the price per thousand that I have to beat in order to get this order. So because the more you know about the piece, the more you might be able to bring ideas to the table about maybe a shift in the number of colors or the size of the piece or how it will be shipped or the postal issues. So again, it's really about looking at the big picture, understanding that whole story so that you can bring your expertise to the table and say, here are my ideas, here's why people work with me, because I don't just take the order. I want to really get to understand this and be somebody that you use as a resource.
Excellent. All right, perfect. And that is something about the 20-to-1 ratio. There's our next short attention span webinar. Kelly, great job. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
And we'll talk to you all again on a future webinar.